You're live.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a regularly scheduled city council workshop. Today is Monday, September 9th. It is 5:57 PM. Around the table, we have Councillor Leonard, Councillor Schaefer, Councillor Pelletier, Councillor Fish, Councillor Hawes, Councillor Dean, Councillor Yakabaga, Councillor Trumbull, Councillor Fournier, and we are joined by City Manager Debbie Lurie. Our first item on the agenda is an update on the Hope House shelter.
Yes, so I'm just gonna do a brief introduction because you have a couple of guests here who are gonna be able to speak to this issue in far more detail than I can. I think folks are aware that Penobscot Community Healthcare made a determination late last fall that they were not continuing to operate the Hope House shelter as things were currently laid out. There are a lot of efforts underway in the legislature to ensure that additional funding came forward for low barrier shelters in particular. Since that time, they've been looking for someone to partner with. The group that they've been partnering with is Preble Street. So I'm gonna have Lori Dwyer, the Chief Executive Officer of PCHC, and you'll have an opportunity to meet Mark Swan, who is the Executive Director of Preble Street. They can provide you with an update on where things are with the Hope House transition, and obviously an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what Preble Street does in other areas of the state. So having said that, I'm gonna get up and invite you both up here. How's that?
Where?
Come right on. I'll even let you two sit together if you want. Okay.
Hello, good evening.
Hi.
You want us to just take it away?
Sure, dive right in.
Things are. Okay. So I'll let Mark introduce himself.
Yeah, I talked to the city manager and thought it might be a good idea to do a brief introduction, not of me personally, but of Preble Street. It's hard to do it quickly. I've been there for 33 years. And the agency has a lot of different parts to it, but I will do my best to be succinct. We kind of look at our work in two different ways. Well, first I'll start by saying, I will make it about me for a minute. When I started, we had two employees, me and Florence. We had a small soup kitchen and a small drop-in room. We now have over 300 employees and run a whole range of services that I'll quickly run through. But the way we kind of think about our work is in two different directions. One is basic needs, basic services. That's maybe what we're more known for. But in addition to that, we spend a lot of our energy and I think many of us get up in the morning to go to work to think about more solution focused work and long-term kind of impact work. So that's kind of the two paths we take. In terms of the basic needs, right now, not counting Hope House Shelter, we run three other shelters, one for unaccompanied youth, ages 12 to 21, one for women, single women, and one a low barrier shelter for men and women who have significant behavioral issues. Most are not allowed in any other shelter, have lots and lots of challenges. So those are the three shelters we run. In addition to that, we operate in partnership with Avesta Housing. We run three Housing First, site-based Housing First programs that I'm happy to talk about more. I would put those very much in the solution-oriented work. I'm kind of off path here, but that's really exciting work. We opened the first one in New England in 2005, followed up 5 years later with another one, 5 years after that with another one, kind of picking away at it, but we're really excited. And many of you may already know, but in the session before last, the state is finally kind of adopting that model and putting some funds behind it. And the model can now go to scale around the state to be run by any number of agencies, certainly not just Preble Street. But we're really excited about, experimenting with something, taking some risks 20 years ago, and then seeing it come to, a scalable model. Took longer than we'd hoped, but we're excited about it. Back to basic needs, we run a health clinic in partnership with Maine Medical Center and Tufts Medical School. We've done that for many years. our food programs. I mentioned when I started, we had this little tiny breakfast soup kitchen. We're now doing about 2,000 meals a day, 7 days a week. We're doing that for our programs, but also providing meals at the city shelter, the Milestone Shelter, the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club. We've really expanded the food production model as opposed to the soup kitchen model. So we make the food and it goes out instead of drawing people together because of the pandemic and what we learned there. We're investing a significant amount of funds to expand that food program. We're renovating a 30,000 square foot building right now. When it's completed in about a year, we'll have capacity to do up to 10,000 meals a day, which we may or may not need, and I kind of hope we don't. But down the line in the future, as things change, as organizations change, as demographics change, when emergencies happen, we'll have capacity there. So the food is a big part of what we do. We opened, again, in partnership with Maine Med, but also with our local FQHC, a respite care program, just about 2 years ago, which is to help people who you and I would be discharged from the hospital, perhaps to go home or to go to another setting where someone can keep an eye on us or help us. But if you're homeless, you don't have that, and you either get discharged prematurely and end up back in the hospital, or you get discharged and get sicker and even die. So this is a new model for us. We're doing that, and we've done that the last 2 years. That's a 15-bed shelter-like program. We have a whole range of services for homeless and runaway kids. I mentioned the teen shelter, but in addition to that, we have a school program, a mental health partnership with Day One, and do transitional housing for youth throughout Greater Portland using private market apartments. We just opened a new effort in Biddeford for young people, which I can go on if you want. And we have an anti-trafficking program. It's a statewide program to work with survivors of sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And we've been doing that for a number of years in partnership with the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maine. And we have, I would put this in the category of solutions. We have been running a veterans housing program for about 15 years. It's a statewide effort. It's a case management focused program with resources, meaning funding to help people with rent, unpaid utilities, getting their car fixed, things like that. We have offices in Bangor, Lewiston, and Portland, providing those kind of case management services. So I think, and we have a rapid rehousing program in Lewiston now. I think I've covered most everything. So it's a big beast of an agency. It makes my head spin a little bit. Some of the work we do used to be done by other agencies, and I think maybe that's why Lori thought of us a little bit. Besides the work we do in shelters, we have kept other shelters open, and I can talk about that if you'd like. But we feel like, you know, the need in this state and this community to keep our small number of shelters open is critical. So when Lori called me just about a year ago, and reached out, you can imagine all the questions I had, and we worked through together, and, you know, we're happy to answer questions about that. But a lot of due diligence has been done. The city manager mentioned some new state funding. That certainly was kind of a game changer in that decision. We still have a ways to go, but we're really excited about it. I've come up many, many times the last 6 months and met with a lot of people in the community. Every single person I've talked to, bar none, has said shelter needs to stay open. It would be devastating to lose that shelter. Can you help? You know, is there something you can do? Even if they don't know Preble Street, or even if it's not Preble Street they're excited about, they definitely, I think there's a great consensus that it's an important shelter and it does really, really good work and has good people there. So that's a brief introduction. I'll probably finish up and think, oh, shoot, I forgot to mention this or this, but that's a start anyway.
Yeah, so I'm Lori, for those of you who may not know, I'm the president and CEO of PCHC. It's probably obvious from Mark's introduction that the reasons why PCHC approached Preble Street to think about and asked Mark to just think about, is this something you would consider? Given the strengths and the resources at Preble Street and the kind of focused work that they do to support people experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, and really, we have such shared missions and similar missions. And it really was an opportunity and continues to be an opportunity that I think both organizations are really excited about, to leverage each other's strengths and really partner at the Hope House and be able to have all of what Mark described. I visited his facilities in Portland, not all, but quite a few of them. The food security hub is remarkable. I mean, if you get a chance, ask him for a tour. It's something to behold. And then all of their programs are so compatible with and really aligned with the way that we do the work at PCHC, our mission, our philosophy, our approach. So it just it's a good fit between the organizations, and it's great to have Preble Street. I think will be great to have them even more embedded in the Bangor community. As you mentioned, they do some work here in their veterans program, and this will bring even more of their expertise to the community, which is, I think, wonderful, and puts us in a, we hope we continue, like just a win-win situation for the community and for the populations that we're serving. So I think we're both here to share that positive update with you, and let you know that the conversations and the transfer of shelter operations from Hope House to Preble Street continues. The work continues. The project is picking up steam. We have one sort of really important milestone still that we have to achieve in working with the state, and one of the state contracts that really needs to transfer, and it was a condition of both board votes. But that's progressing well as well. The state's really partnering with us to try to make that happen. So we're optimistic, but that's not yet finished. So the timeline that we've discussed, and I don't know, I'll stop whenever you want me to, but I want to make sure we answer your questions. But just very briefly, the timeline that we've talked about, assuming those kind of milestones are met, would be sort of the first quarter of next year, February, March. PCHC will continue to operate the shelter during that time. The funding that was secured at the state level, which we partnered on with all the rest of the low barrier shelters in the state, as well as the Attorney General's opioid settlement funds, and those have made it possible for us to continue to keep the shelter operating while we can make a smooth transition, hopefully, to Preble Street going forward. So that's the kind of the status, that's the timeline we're looking at. And then I imagine you're curious about the ARPA funding for the shelter. So let me talk about that briefly. So we have had, our goal and Preble Street's goal is to renovate the shelter. And we're really grateful to the city for continuing to be willing to work with us as we go through this process and the transfer, so that those renovations can happen, because regardless of who operates the shelter, they're really, really important for all sorts of reasons: safety, efficiency, and then just the ability to really provide meaningful services in a space that works. So the construction plans have moved forward. We've shared some of those updates with the city, and I know Ed recently, maybe even today in March, today met with Debbie and her team to talk about the lease and whether we would need to shift the footprint in the lease in order to make the renovations happen. So I think that work is continuing. There's a meeting set up with Preble Street's team this week or next to really dig into the design and make sure both organizations are aligned around kind of the design that we put forward for those renovations. But in principle, what we proposed to the city, which was an expansion of the communal space, shifting the shelters to a different open concept, expanding some of the shelter space, as well as the kitchen and the shelter, all of that remains. That continues to be the case. and will continue to be the case moving forward. And at this point, as we really hone in on the final designs and hire the construction manager, we'll be working hand in hand with Preble Street to make all that happen. PCHC will continue to kind of own and run the construction, and the construction oversee the construction as we hold the lease for the building with the city. But obviously, and as we talked about with Debbie recently, we're gonna make sure that any requests for drawdowns and any moves we make is jointly consented to, and that we demonstrate that to the city when we put any requests in. So the goal would be to have the construction manager on board by the end of the year and be able to begin renovations in 2025 after Preble Street assumes operations of the shelter. So those are, of course, construction timelines. So it's a little bit fluid, but we understand the deadlines, of course, under the funding that are required by the funding, and are eager, frankly, to move forward and make these renovations happen at the shelter. I think that's probably it. And then I'm happy to take questions, or I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah. Happy to answer any questions. Just if it wasn't clear, we're shooting for like a February 1st transition date. Just wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah.
Questions? Councilor Fournier.
So as you know, I voted against, then we've talked about that, the ARPA funding, because in my mind, it was always a state issue. Because the shelters weren't receiving the aid that you all needed. So my question is, with this new state funding, and I know you've done some due diligence, will this at least be neutral, or as far as the bottom line goes, or is that what the talks with the state are continuing?
Well, you can imagine my first conversation with the board of Preble Street saying, we've been approached and the annual budget of this program is about $2 million and it's got about a $1 million deficit. You can imagine how the board responded to that. And I will say, again, our history in kind of absorbing a couple other programs has been a little bit similar, because the reasons Salvation Army or Catholic Charities or some of these agencies have closed down programs is similar to what PCHC is going through. So as Lori described, we worked really hard together, and the Bangor delegation was great, and the governor's office was great, Maine Housing, everybody worked pretty hard on our collective behalf to secure the new funding that you mentioned, and then from the state. And I think that's going to end up to be about 500,000 or so for Hope House. So that's half the deficit. Then we've got the Attorney General's money, and that's another couple $100,000. Then we're hoping with the Maine Recovery Council to get some other opioid settlement money. So suddenly the number's getting smaller and more manageable. And it got close enough, quite frankly, where we said, this is such a mission alignment decision. There's nobody else kind of lining up to do this. Second largest shelter in the state and the third largest city during a homeless crisis, So we feel it's close enough to break even. We're still hoping to raise $200,000 probably from private sources. We do a lot of private fundraising. So that's the short answer of the next year, 2 or 3. The other piece you should know, just for full transparency, is the state's money is for 3 years. And we're kind of used to that too. Just like municipalities, we start each year, okay, we've got to work really hard to find our revenues and secure what we need. So I consider the clock has already started ticking on that 3-year window. We're not going to wait till a week before. And honestly, that funding cliff doesn't just affect Hope House, it affects other shelters that we run. So we're and on one hand, we were served well by that effort this past session. But 3 years from now, we're going to be hit hard. So all I can tell you is our track record has been really good at securing new funds, creating funds sometimes. Sometimes it's state, sometimes it's federal, and often it's private support as well. We raise a lot of private money every year. So the board felt comfortable enough with the financial health to make the vote. And they were not, it was not easy. I have a really good, strong board and they take, their decisions very seriously. So we get peppered with lots of questions.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Counselor Dean.
Question for you. You had mentioned the communal space and kitchen space expanding, and maybe I missed it, but is there additional sleeping areas as well? I thought we were having more beds.
Yeah, so we will be, thank you for asking that. We will be, so pre-pandemic, we had capacity for 66 beds. We had 66 beds and we're down to 55 with our emergency mat. So we would return to the pre-pandemic bed numbers at Hope House. And then in addition, we'll have 4 beds that are what we're calling flex beds essentially. So that would give us the capacity, for example, in another pandemic, to have a little bit of flexibility for isolation. And also if the community's been having a lot of conversations about the need for medical respite or other services to support an aging, especially an aging population of people experiencing homelessness. And so we, without having the ability to plan to do that, we wanted to have a little bit of flex space in the shelter so that that kind of a future service is something we might be able to provide, at least on a small scale, to get us started towards something like that in the future. And, Preble Street has experience opening the first medical respite facility in the state. So so they also bring that experience to Bangor, and hopefully we can start to make a service like that work here.
Counselor Trumbull.
Well, I don't have a question, just a comment, just to echo what you've been hearing from people you've talked to in the community, how I'm very grateful that you've stepped up for this. I mean, the Hope House, obviously, since it's been on the PCHC, it's been run well, but since it started, it's struggled. I mean, as these types of services do any place. I mean, when I was in college a couple of years ago, it was on Park Street Hill, and I wrote a paper for a class, and it was trying to find a new place at that time, and so my paper was, where's the Hope House gonna go? And I don't even remember where it went from there. I don't think it went there directly. This was in the mid-80s, but it's always struggled. So to have your organization, this is what you do, it makes sense. I don't think it, even though it was great, the PCHC ran it for a number of years, I don't think it really aligned with what they're a healthcare organization, and they do a great job at it. So this was not only a financial drain, I think it was a drain of resources that took you away from your, maybe a little bit away from your mission. So I think it's gonna be great for you, good for you, and great for the city, and great for people who need those services. So thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Thank you, Councilor Forney, for asking the question. I was going to ask about budgets and shortfalls and that sort of thing. Very glad to see that this partnership is happening, that it's been something that's been heavy on my mind for months, kind of wondering what the fate is of the Hope House. It performs such an important service in our community. And I think we've all been hoping that it would work out. So thank you for taking it over. Councilor Forney.
And if there's anything this council can do, I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole council, but I think we're fully in support of whatever we can do to help. But
Thank you.
whatever you need.
Thank you.
And I would just generally express gratitude for the support we've gotten from the city council and the city throughout the process when we were advocating at the state level and in other contexts. We really, PCHC very much appreciates it. I know Preble Street does, and just want to convey our gratitude to you all.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for driving up.
He spends a lot of time out there.
Next item on the agenda is the review of the Cascade Park Master Plan.
We'll go on this side. And right before that. Thank you, Tracy Willett, Parks and Recreation Director. Let's kind of go over with you something we've been working on a little longer than we initially planned, but I wanted to make sure that we got in front of you folks to share and update you what we've been working on specific to Cascade Park. As part of the FY24 budget process, and as a result of discussion on master plan, we were approved for funding for a master plan for Cascade Park. Cascade, and we all know Cascade's a destination for citizens here in the community, for visitors around the region, and certainly is a signature destination amenity for us and an important feature here in the city. So it certainly warranted a little more dedicated effort as far as a master planning exercise. So we were able to contract with the same consultants that did our facilities master plan, R.S. Leonard. And as you'll see, if you look through the document, much of it, especially at the end with the capital planning tables that she has set up, they have set up, it looks a lot like our master plan. So there's a lot of consistency there. And R.S. Leonard certainly had the background of the park specifically from our master plan. And I didn't want to go through all of them tonight, but I did pick 4 or 5 pages to kind of share with you and go over with you specifically. But the first part of the plan goes over what the existing conditions. And as you'll see, some of the pieces over there date back to the original construction back in the 30s. And it's been interesting to go through this process and kind of, you look at some of the pictures of how it looked when it was first constructed. It's a little different now. So we've been able to meet with Regina and her Haley Ward team. We've shared some of the background, and she met with our Park and Rec Advisory Committee as well. So what you have in front of you is kind of where we're at with the draft plan, and wanted to have that conversation with you tonight. One of the pages I go to first is the project goals, which I think is on page 10 of at least what we have here in front of us. It's at the top, says project goals and recommended actions. Yes. So as you'll see, and we met with the folks from R.S. Leonard and Haley Ward quite a few times, and went through what we were hoping to get out of the plan, what we think was going to be important to develop from the plan. And certainly the first item was a plan for a more resilient, low maintenance landscape. If you've been over there, especially some of the invasives that are along the walkways, some of the legacy trees up by the grotto. Unfortunately, a couple of those we lost during some recent storms. Balancing those landscape features out. Relocating the fountain and pool mechanics above ground. As you saw in some of the introductory pages, much of the mechanical features, the circulation pumps, the valves and the drains are currently underground, and those we would like to get those above ground. And addressing the conditions of the grotto and the waterfall and the center fountain. In the appendices that she goes through the timeline, probably the most significant renovation at Cascade Park goes back to 88, 89. Prior to that, the fountain was not running. Significant citizen initiative raised money to get the fountain going again. We've been making kind of hit or miss improvements as we go along. She noted, for example, back in 2000, we recoated the bottom of the pool with essentially armor coating. And that's held up ever since, or at least so far. And we're starting to see some wear and tear on that. So taking the time and attention to look at the center fountain and certainly start a plan to address those needs and repairs and new construction. And then specify park improvements and the amenities. One of the features that became apparent to them right away, there's not really a gateway entrance right now. Since you come off the parking lot that enters onto State Street, and you kind of pick up the path there with some of our signage. So to create kind of a gateway feature, and I think she shares some examples later on in the report and the plan, what that might look like. Incorporating a larger gazebo. Right now, we have a small gazebo there that's been there as long as I can remember. Nothing goes back to the improvements made in the late eighties. And it's primarily for ceremonies that folks use for weddings and parties and that sort of thing. So as you'll see in the concept that they developed, relocating that gazebo to a different place in the park. And then some lighting and improvements as well. So the next page kind of goes through the recommendations. So I'm on page 11 now, and you'll see throughout this, the recommendations for site improvements. And one of the features and pieces of the conversation that we had with them right early on is balancing the need for improvements, new amenities, new construction, but yet trying to maintain much of the historic character of the park. Grotto is much original. Back in the late eighties, there was gunite that was spread over the channel that goes from the grotto to the fountain pool. Perhaps bringing some of that original stonework back as best as possible. So that was one of the things we wanted to make sure that we maintain as best we could. And amongst those, certainly we talked about the vegetation, perhaps reestablishing, restoring the historic layout of the paths within the park by trying to connect the main path right to State Street through the existing sidewalks. Certainly the Water District side will have some issues to work through there as far as property line and where that goes, but felt that was an important connection to make. We already talked about the gazebo, as some picnic shelters up on the top, that on the closer to the Saxel Park side, and then a new outbuilding to house the mechanical room, incorporate restrooms over there as well as utilities. So, and you'll see in the concept that they developed, essentially locating that building where the existing portables are now. The mechanicals certainly is something that we're on borrowed time over there. The pumps, we are fortunate to have a local contractor who was able to address any issues we have with the pumps. The pit that we have there now, the below ground pit, we have drainage issues that sometimes floods. So we're dealing with that. We were able to locate the electrical up in that great cabinet that you see along the walkway. We did that a few years ago, but certainly bringing that above ground eliminates the need to enter that space for staff. And again, between the utilities and the stormwater and some of the other plan recommendations that we've already talked about, they do a really good job of laying all that out for us and what should be done. So I'll skip to the master plan concept, which I believe is going to be 19. It kind of gives you an overall sense of that specifically up there in the northeast, it's the northeast corner. There you go. So here's kind of the overall layout that they have proposed in the draft plan. Along the side there are certainly the numbered features, and those features are located throughout the plan. And you'll find later on in the capital plan, we'll get to that, a timeline for possibilities of when all of this would happen. And then finally, I'll just go to the last page. I was just going to touch on it for you all tonight. The capital plan at the end, Courtney. It's in the appendices after the historical overview and timeline. I think it's the last 2 or 3 pages of it. And I don't have a page number, I'm sorry. So there's a key, and then there's, as they have done with the master plan, RS Leonard did a real good job of laying out a timeline for us. Currently, you folks approve funding for us as part of the current fiscal year to work with a consultant to do the topographical survey. The survey will give us the actual boundaries, help us do with some of the research based on what the other recommendations is in it, is putting this on the National Register of Historic Places. So the topographical survey was one of the first pieces of their recommendation to work on. And again, you folks approve funding for us to do that in this current fiscal year. So we'll be working on that with a consultant to complete the topographical survey. And parallel to that, start the process to get Cascade Park on the National Park Registry. I kind of summarized over a few pages. It was about a 60 somewhat page document. The timeline was also interesting. If you go back to one of the appendices, from construction to the history of the park, during the mid to late 70s, really it was a struggling location. Go back to the effort in the late 80s to fundraise and bring the park back, brought the fountain back, and did a fair amount of work over there to get the lighting back in and the ring and the fountain, and get it running. We currently run the fountain as we do park hours. So, and then the lights will come on at nights and then it shuts down at 10 o'clock. I can share with you, we're having some issues currently with some leaking that we haven't been able to locate. We can't be able to locate all of the plumbing lines accurately yet. We think they might go up underneath the trees somewhere, but again, having a plan like this for a park like Cascade certainly made sense to move forward with, and wanted to share it with you tonight. Ultimately, if we can work through questions you might have, we'd like to get this on one of your agendas for actual adoption.
Counselor Schaefer.
This is like one of my favorite. I'm such a nerd for this stuff, but I loved all the historic, like, so whoever did it was a great job. It was fascinating to see the old historic pictures with no trees. I thought that was great.
It makes two of us, we're historical nerds. It makes two of us.
And the other thing is that I think it all looks great. I'm in support of all of it. The one thing with the gazebo, will the bandstand be like a true bandstand with power that could Bangor band play there? Could it be used for performances? Because I have heard that from people, is that when they took down the Cross Center, they took down the gazebo, the bandstand that was there. Now Bangor Band has their little inflatable that goes around, but we've done so much on the waterfront, and I feel like if we're gonna be doing stuff here, to make that a place that you could have those smaller.
I think it could be. I don't know if it would be large enough for the band, and certainly we're in that concept planning right now. So as we go along.
And maybe not even the band, maybe not as big as the Bangor
Certainly,
Band,
yeah.
but just big enough that it's
Yep,
not just a wedding party, but it could be used for a performance or something like that. That would be my one consideration that I would add to it.
And I think that question was part of the logic of moving the gazebo into a different space to accommodate something a little bigger, a little larger for those type of activities.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think it's awesome. Thank you.
Counselor Hutz.
I remember when we were talking about this on the advisory.
Yep.
There was a lot of talk about fall areas out there as far as coming down through the path, and I noticed there was quickly in passing, they talked about handrails and some other types of things, so I assume we would see more of that at some point, and where they were talking about putting them was really more just right along the fall itself, that people were slipping on coming down, so.
And you'll see through the goals and the planning, yes, indeed, up at the top of the grotto where the falls are, is incorporating more substantial safety barriers and rerouting the pathways away from that top necessarily, but still allowing for that view. Yeah, it's all part of the recommendation.
They did a great job with
Yeah,
this.
they did.
It really looks nice.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I remember when the fountain came back.
Yes, it's kind of a big deal.
It was kind of a big deal. My high school graduating class took a picture of all of us
Yeah.
at Cascades Park. It's been an important part of our family. We really enjoy it.
Well, thank you.
My only questions on the funding, I see a lot of the next 2 years is mostly the planning, and then after that, construction begins, and that's a $3 million plus price tag. Looks like a lot of it is grant or sponsor funding. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about your plan for that?
So currently, until we get the plan adopted, and once you all adopt that, then that allows us to seek out, for example, we've used Land Water Conservation Fund money for that kind of activity. There might be once we get it registered in National Park Registry, there might be other funding opportunities out there. So like we have with our master plan, using kind of the outline that RS Leonard provided, here are some potential funding sources. So we'll certainly be searching for those kind of opportunities.
Other discussion? Yes,
Just out of curiosity, are any of our other parks on the National Historical Register?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't
And what would
think so.
constitute being able to do that? The age of the
The
park?
age of the park, the amenities, and sure we'll find more of those details out. But I don't know that. No, Broadway's a corridor. So this will be the first one, yeah.
very good. Thank you for the.
Thank you all.
I enjoyed the links to old articles and pictures and stuff.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that
I
was neat.
The electrocuted kids.
Yeah.
chain link fence around it.
See, now we tease it, that people are gonna read it, like they're electrocuted kids and it's.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, last on the agenda, city manager updates.
It was nice to go by the history of Cascade Park. Just a couple of quick things, the Y property, so, we're working with representatives of the Y to move that action forward. So I expect in the coming weeks, we're gonna have an order that will authorize the sale or long-term lease of, portions of Talbot Park, as well as the discontinuance and conveyance of a portion of Davis Court, for the construction of the new facility. At the, what, in honor of Tracy being here, he's like, ooh. At the August 21st school committee meeting, the school committee did approve the use of the Griffin Road parcel for a consolidated Parks and Rec facility, so that's. Obviously, we're a long ways from that, but at least that's the first step for us. United Technology Center, so I think most of you are familiar with that. It is, the UTC is the regional, and for ours, it's 35 communities. They provide career and technical education to high school students in 23 different program areas. The State Department of Education just notified UTC of their ability to apply for just under $1.9 million in funding to upgrade equipment in 18 of their 23 programs. The borrowing requires voter approval of all of the residents of the 35 communities. Interestingly enough, under state statute, the career and technical education institutions have the authority to place questions on community ballots. So at your next council meeting, there's actually going to be an order authorizing the inclusion of that on our upcoming November election. The good news is this $1.9 million is going to be fully funded by the state of Maine, so it actually does not impact our taxpayers. So, and the way the ballot question is written, it says clearly, do you favor the support of $1,740,000 worth of borrowing? The full debt service associated with this will be paid by the state of Maine, and there is no impact, but we did want to get that before you. And then the last item I had was, Council Chair Pelletier and I are currently sitting on the Legislative Policy Committee for MMA. They had their first planning session, at the end of August. So obviously they always have a broader platform of initiatives. Right now, interesting to try to see 50 to 60 people all come to agreement on something, I'm just saying. The broader initiatives that they've agreed to, look at language for our special education funding, expansion of eligible TIF uses, local option sales tax, amendments to the tax provided property, taxation of short-term rentals and second homes, homestead exemption, tree growth reform, and veterans motor vehicle excise exemptions. In addition to that, they created 5 working groups. Property tax reform, which I will be serving on, unfunded mandates, PFAS, housing and general assistance, which Council Chair Pelletier will be serving on, and Maine Criminal Justice Academy training. The next full meeting is later this month, and we'll continue to provide updates as the work progresses. So, but yes, it's quite a sight to see. That's all I had. I thought couple of these things would go a little bit longer, so,
Right.
okay.
Any other questions or comments?